A while back, I attempted to beat Plants vs. Zombies without any of my plants dying. This was a pretty difficult challenge, especially the roof levels and 2-10 and 5-5 both required some save scumming.
That said, the reason I'm bringing up Plants vs. Zombies challenges in a video that's about the sequel is because of the two impossible levels. In 1-5, Crazy Dave forces us to shovel our own plants, while in 5-10, Zomboss is a killing machine that will kill at least a few plants. The reason I bring this up is because in Plants vs. Zombies 2, there's even more levels with pre-planted plants, even more Zomboss battles, and even more challenges outside of those. A Plants vs. Zombies 2 pacifist challenge will be incredibly difficult. Actually, screw it, it's just flat out impossible. Yeah, sorry for the spoiler, but even going into this challenge, I knew there were a few levels that are just impossible without a few sacrifices. So that raises the question, why even do this challenge at all? And to that I say, look at these guys, you can't kill them, can you? That's what I thought. Maybe I can't beat the game without a few sacrifices, but that doesn't mean I'm not gonna try as hard as I possibly can to save every life I can. Let's get the rules out of the way first so we can get to the good stuff. First of all, obviously no losing any plants. There is a built-in condition that deals with losing plants, and that gives us a pretty good basis to go off of. No plants getting eaten, no plants getting burned, no plants getting crushed, and no instant use plants. Second, there are a few restrictions that I use when I'm doing any challenge. The rules I'm going to use here are no leveling, no power-ups, no buying plant food, and no boosting. I'm also going to ban premium and seedium plants because they either cost money or they take so much grinding that they may as well cost money. At first I allowed myself to use gemiums, but after the first few levels I decided to ban them as well for consistency. Besides, most gemiums are instants and so they wouldn't help me much anyway. Finally, this is done on the most recent version of Plants vs. Zombies 2. Believe me, I tried to find old versions, but nothing worked, so we're just gonna stick with the modern version. With all the rules and formalities out of the way, let's get started. The tutorial starts out relatively smoothly, and we're introduced to a few new plants along the way. As usual, pea shooters are solid until we unlock literally any other attacking plant. They can be spammed, but that doesn't really work as well since we can't use the shovel, more on that later. Unlike the first game, sunflowers have the same issue. Twin sunflowers unlocked at the end of ancient Egypt and works better for this challenge. But at least for the time being, sunflower works pretty well. Walnut, on the other hand, is going to be sticking around for a little bit. Not only is it a defensive plant, which is great when we don't want our plants to get hurt, but it also doesn't get outclassed until maybe Talnut and more likely Primal Walnut. Walnut is going to be incredibly useful throughout this challenge, especially in the next level, because the next plant we unlock is Potato Mine. You can probably guess the issue here. Potato Mine explodes, exploding is dying, and that means we can't use it. Now in that case, I should probably just not use it, but the issue comes in this level, where pre-planted potato mines are right on the front of the lawn. To make matters worse, 3 Buckethead zombies immediately show up to try and explode the potato mines. You might look at this situation and think that the level's immediately impossible, but that's not actually the case. You see, in the tutorial, plants recharge a lot faster than usual. This means that if you plant walnuts quickly enough, you can defend the potato mines in the top 2 rows before the Bucketheads reach them. And if the Buckethead in the bottom row is slow enough, you can defend that one too. Now, the Buckethead zombie does have to be really slow, which meant I had to restart a lot to get that RNG. And that was a lot harder because at some point in modern Plants vs. Zombies 2, they got rid of save scumming. Actually, it gets worse than that. In the first few levels, including this one, there is no more pause button anymore, which meant I had to close out the game and reopen it every time. Getting rid of music, fine. Making animations look janky at first, sure, whatever. But removing the pause button, I think, is a step too far. All that made grinding out this level take a little bit longer, but in the end I was able to consistently defend the bottom potato mine and figure out a strategy for the rest of the level. And so, after about 45 minutes worth of attempts, I gave up. Here's the issue. The potato mines are only one part of the problem, because once we plant down the walnuts to protect them,
The Bucketheads will eventually chew through them if we don't kill them first. Buckethead zombies are really powerful, and you need a ton of damage to take them out. And with the Conehead reinforcements that come in immediately after, it's really difficult to defend everything. Putting down more walnuts to protect the first walnuts helped, but it really just delayed the inevitable, and no mixture of sunflowers and pea shooters seemed to get the DPS I needed. It definitely didn't help that it took about 10 minutes each time to get a proper attempt for this level, but even without that, I just don't think there's much hope for this one. The zombies are just too tough for the plants we have now. So, the potato mine in the top row, presumably the bravest, hence why it was ahead of the others, had to explode. The first life was lost, and the challenge was impossible. Sure would be nice if I could just skip the whole level, modern PvZ 2, am I right, guys? With only 2 potato mines to defend, the level is difficult. It took me about 5 minutes, but it's definitely possible. That said, yeah, this sucks. It's been like 4 levels and the challenge is already impossible. So that just means this is a minimalist run now, where I try and avoid every death possible. Don't think that means I'll be slacking though. Like I said at the beginning of this video, my goal is still to avoid every death possible. So 1 potato mine has died so far, and unfortunately it's not gonna get much better from here on out. The good news is that the next 2 levels are a breeze. The last level of the tutorial basically defends itself, and the first level of Ancient Egypt brings back Kiwi Beast. In case you're wondering, I grinded ads and offers for gems to buy Kiwi Beast, because I was hoping it might make the tutorial possible. But it doesn't show up until Ancient Egypt, and now that it's here, it's gonna just show up a few times until day 8, where I ended up deciding to ban it. Anyways, that's enough stalling. Let's get to Ancient Egypt Day 2, the power-up tutorial. If you thought the tutorial was bad with 3 pre-planted potato mines, this one has 6. One of them's on the very front of the lawn. There is no world in which this level's possible. And you can't use any fancy tricks or even the power-ups to stop this, because sometimes the zombies just spawn right on top of the potato mines necromancy style. You really can't do anything. I did end up skipping this level the first time around, but I came back with the same plans to see how many potato mines I could save. First of all, no power-ups here. I know there used to be no way to beat this one without power-ups, but there is now, so I'm not allowing myself to use them. Second, a ton of zombies will spawn right on the potato mines, but only the column where they spawn is set. The row is random. Because of all of this, I was able to defend 2 potato mines after about 15 minutes worth of attempts with a lot of good RNG. And if it took that much RNG to get 2 potato mines saved, there was no way I was going to get any more than that. That means that a total of 4 more potato mines have to die here. It sucks, they didn't do anything wrong, but we don't have a choice but to keep moving forward and hope no more plants will die from here on out. After day 2, the levels start to die down a bit, and I was able to use the simpler structure of these levels to start figuring out some strategies I could use for the rest of the run. The biggest thing that determines strategy for these levels is that we cannot use the shovel for this challenge. This means that if a plant is placed down, we cannot get rid of it or replace it. Since planting spammable plants over and over, like say pea shooter, tends to get your plants more far forward than their safe being, I tended to only plant sun producers and the strongest plants I had access to. For that reason, Bloomerang was my main attacker for most of Ancient Egypt. It has solid damage and crowd control, which make it a pretty good choice if we don't want to plant as many plants. Cabbage Pole is also pretty solid here. Its plant food takes out basic zombies, and that helps a ton since Ancient Egypt has a lot of those. Neither of these plants will probably be used much after Ancient Egypt, but they're pretty good here. Mowers are also pretty interesting in this challenge, because once we start planting plants down, the zombies aren't really going to be able to reach the mowers easily without destroying the plants and making me fail the challenge. I tended to kill the first few zombies with the lawnmowers, which both made them not useless and let me start building up sun to afford the pretty expensive bloomerangs. These strategies made most levels go by pretty smoothly, including day 6, which is the first interesting level. Most of the level's pretty easy, but at the end it introduces a Gargantuar, and Gargantuars are some of the hardest zombies we'll face throughout the challenge. They have a ton of health and can insta-kill basically everything, so plant food is almost necessary to deal with them. Thankfully, some bloomerang plant food was able to wipe out this one, and I was able to move on. A few levels after that is Day 8, which has pre-planted plants at the front of the lawn. Man, this game sucks. I'm gonna go play the card game. Just like in the tutorial, 2 explorer zombies spawned right in front of our pre-planted plants, and since they destroy everything, there's even less we can do this time. If we had plant food, we could use iceberg lettuce's plant food to stop them, and the same would be true if we had kernel pulp, but since we don't have either of those options, there's just not much we can do. There was no choice but to add 2 to the death total, so I let the top iceberg lettuce freeze the top explorer zombie before blocking it with a walnut, and I put a second iceberg lettuce in the bottom lane to freeze the second one. I could have just let the explorer zombie burn the walnut instead, but not only is this easier, but instants don't really get a lot to do during this challenge, so at least if they die here, they'll be remembered. As always, the level's pretty easy after that as long as you defend the potato mines and walnuts in the front. But I'm gonna be honest, I was kinda getting sick of this whole routine at this point. Sure, I was making great progress, but I kept losing plants that just were placed on the front of the lawn like they were supposed to die or something. It definitely doesn't help that most levels that have been impossible so far didn't used to be and were only made impossible in modern updates. If I had to guess, I'd say the one at fault here is Crazy Dave. Not only has he gotten a bad history of just killing our plants, but who else is going to plant these plants at the front of the lawn? He's probably doing what he tried to do in the first game and try and make plant deaths not seem all that important. Well, guess what, David? You can't tell me what to do. And the good news is that from this point on, there's not really that many pre-planted plants. Since pre-planted plants aren't an issue and ancient Egypt is really basic, the rest of the world goes by really smoothly. Every level is just so short and easy that I was able to do basically whatever I wanted for every one. There are also some interesting plants unlocked here. Iceberg lettuce and Gravebuster are both pretty unusable instants, but iceberg lettuce has a plant food effect that can freeze the entire screen. I never ended up finding a use for it, but it is there. Bonk Choy is a melee plant, which may seem bad for a challenge like this, but its damage is so high and it's so good early game that it ended up seeing a lot of use throughout the run. After day 20, Repeater is unlocked, and it ended up replacing Bloomerang as my main attacking plant thanks to its power. A few levels after that is day 22, which is probably the only tricky regular level in ancient Egypt. There's a lot of zombies, and we can't plant a lot of plants thanks to the conditions. On my winning attempt, I only ended up using 2 sunflowers. They were able to get me a column of Repeaters and Bonk Choys, which allowed me to beat the level. After 2 more surprisingly easy levels, there was only 1 level left. I'd managed to steamroll all of ancient Egypt with not even much to talk about. Unfortunately, the 1 level left is the first Zomboss battle, and the Zomboss battles are going to be some of the hardest levels throughout the entire run. Zomboss was half the reason the challenge was impossible in Plants vs. Zombies 1, and he is even worse here. The amount of zombies he can summon has increased exponentially. Mix that with the charge attacks, the missiles, and what's exclusive to this Zombot, the Graves, and we have an insanely difficult fight ahead of us. There is one saving grace though, and that's plant food, which can protect our plants if they're hit by a missile or charge attack. The strategy for this level is to spam attacking plants like Bloomerang and Repeater, and use plant food on them whenever they need it. However, this doesn't work after Wave 1. Waves 2 and 3 have Gargantuars and Explorer zombies respectively, and the swarms get so big that with the plants we have in this level, there's not much way we can take them out. There is also just so much RNG with this level. Zomboss could throw Graves at the back of the lawn or charge at your plants when you don't have plant food whenever he feels like it. With the plants we have access to not being strong enough to deal with this insanely strong Zombot, this level just seems impossible. But there have been so many impossible levels, so many deaths I've had to endure, that with this level just seeming a little possible, I couldn't give up. I had to just keep trying and figuring out strategies. Phase 1 is the most important phase of the fight, as it's the easiest and will give you time to set up for the harder phases later on. The goal is to get full plant food by the time you enter Phase 2, while having a very strong defense setup as well. Stalling with lawnmowers helps a ton to get plant food and to look for good plants on the conveyor belt, but don't rely on it too much or else Zomboss might overwhelm your lawn with graves. Try to get a repeater in every row if you can, as they're very important for the rest of the strategy, but otherwise just spam attackers. Zomboss will also summon more and more zombies throughout the phase the more he gets damaged, so try not to damage him too much until you have a solid defense built up. Once you have full plant food, unless you get another one, save it, and let the attacking plants whittle Zomboss's health down until you get to Phase 2. I don't think I stressed enough just how awful Phase 2 is. The Gargantuar spam mixed with a ton of Buckethead spam makes swarms so strong, I don't even think plant food can deal with it. The zombies are just so strong, and I wasn't able to find anything to deal with it. I think this part of the level is impossible without losing a plant. So we're gonna skip it. If you deal enough damage to the Zombot using plant food, you can skip Phase 2 and go straight on to the significantly easier Phase 3. Initially, I used plant food on a bonk choy next to the Zombot, which not only did a ton of damage, but also destroyed any swarms if I didn't end the phase in time. However, having bonk choy so close to the Zombot tended to make it die, so I ended up going to repeaters instead. Repeaters plant food does a ton of damage, and with support from the other attacking plants, it will be enough to skip Phase 2 before any dangerous zombies come out. As soon as Zomboss stops for any reason, whether it be to fire a missile, charge, or even summon zombies, go all out on using Repeater's plant food to take out his health. This doesn't always go perfectly. Sometimes Zomboss shoots a missile at a plant and you have to use a plant food to save it, or sometimes he summons zombies early. Being able to adapt and get good luck is important to survive this phase on any attempt. Also, occasionally, the first time Zomboss summons zombies, there'll be a wave that was supposed to spawn in Phase 1, which is significantly easier to deal with. If that happens, count yourself lucky, get the extra plant food, and use it to wipe out Zomboss. If all goes well, you should deal enough damage to move on to Phase 3. I recommend saving at least one plant food for this phase of the fight because Zomboss charges a lot more in this phase from what I've noticed. Not only would it suck to lose to a charge this far into a run, but if you counter it with Repeater's plant food, you'll do a ton of damage. While the waves here aren't as bad as they are in Phase 2, they still contain Pharaoh zombies and Explorer zombies that can easily destroy your plants. The goal here is to kill Zomboss as soon as possible. The Explorer zombies in particular can kill your plants really easily, so I recommend not planning past the 4th column in order to prevent your plants from getting burned this far into a run. By doing enough damage, maybe using plant food, you will be able to finally defeat the Zombot. This fight took me a lot of time. It took over 4 hours to beat it, and most runs ended because Zomboss decided to charge or miss all my plants or send Gargantuars way too early or something. It's just really hard to win this level when it's so luck-based and your strongest plant is a repeater. Eventually, though, I got the perfect run, where Zomboss kept charging on Phase 2, which let me do all damage without seeing any zombies, while he did the same thing in Phase 3 and even destroyed his own zombies, which let me do so much damage that I destroyed the Zombot. It took a ton of effort and strategy, but in the end, I was able to beat the hardest level yet, by far, with no deaths. After beating that insanely difficult level, we're rewarded with Pirate Seas, which, spoiler alert, is the easiest world in the game. Not only is the level design still really easy, but only weak zombies come through the water lane, so by putting any plant there, you can deal with an entire row for the entire level. I personally used bonk choy for the water lanes, as not only is it pretty capable of dealing with them, but it's also really satisfying to see the heads fall into the water. Speaking of plants, the ones unlocked in this world are also really good. Snapdragons do good damage and have good crowd control, while Kernel Pults are one of the best stallers in the game. I didn't end up using either of them a ton, but they have their niche uses. Spring Bean is usable, it's solid in Pirate Seas and absolutely useless anywhere else, but Cherry Bomb is completely unusable and I'm gonna miss it a lot. Otherwise, I unlocked Three-Peter about midway through the world, and Three-Peter is an amazing plant, great for the same reasons as Repeater, only it's even better. However, I didn't end up using it, and that's because the other 3 plants unlocked in this world are amazing. The first 2 can be discussed together, those being Spikeweed and Spike Rock. The 2 are amazing for 2 main reasons. 1, not many zombies can damage them, and 2, they're a great way to spend any extra sun. Spikeweed is great, cheap, and reliable, while Spike Rock does a lot of damage and can take multiple hits from things like barrel rollers. Both plants are going to be really useful throughout the rest of the challenge. But those aren't even the best plants I unlocked in Pirate Seas, because on day 11, I unlocked what's going to be my main attacking plant for about half the game, Coconut Cannon. Coconut Cannon is an absolute beast. He does a ton of damage, his splash damage can kill basics easily, and you can control when he shoots for good strategies. It does have to charge every time after it attacks, but it's not as long as you might think. It's also pretty expensive, but since I'm using twin sunflowers anyways, I'm easily able to afford it. Coconut Cannon is absolutely one of the best plants in the game for this challenge, and I used it a ton from here on out. And yeah, that's about it. I'm talking about the plants now because there's just not really much going on in this world. I was able to beat every level with ease. There were some interesting levels at least. For instance, did you know you can beat Pirate Seas Day 16 without planting any plants? By just using plant food on the spring beans, you can let them beat the level on their own. But yeah, there wasn't a single level that made me even break a sweat until the Zomboss battle, and even that is so much easier than the last one. The Zombot replaces the missile attack with an imp cannon, which can lead to some early game overs, but is otherwise a lot easier to deal with later on. The only reasons I ever lost on this level were because of that imp cannon attack, and because I occasionally planted too far forward and barrel rollers killed my plants. The main reason this level is so easy is because of my hero, Coconut Cannon. It does a ton of damage to the Zombot with every shot, and by just planting all 5 of them, you can easily deal enough damage to finish him off. The waves in Phase 2 are just as bad as last time, but just by using Coconut Cannon and not even needing plant food, you can easily skip it. Plant food isn't even really necessary to beat this level, and you can just use it whenever you need it. This level only took me about 10 attempts, which is really good compared to the 4 hours the last Zombot battle took. And with that, Pirate Seas is beaten really easily. Next up is Wild West, which is even better at showcasing the absolute power of Coconut Cannon. By placing a Coconut Cannon on the minecarts, you can deal with every single lane during the early game, which gives you more than enough time to set up a good defense for later on. By mixing that with spamming Spikeweeds and destroying piano zombies with Spike Rocks, you can pretty much take care of every single level in Wild West. And yeah, with a few light exceptions, the normal levels in this world are some of the easiest in the entire game. That said, this world isn't as easy as Pirate Seas, and that's because it's the first world that has a solid amount of conveyor belt levels. There are a few problematic conveyor belt levels here, starting with Day 8, the Gargantuar battle. The good news is the plants we get in this level. We're able to use Peapod on minecarts, and Peapod is an amazing plant when you get it stacked. I'd probably be using it a lot more if I wasn't using Coconut Cannon all the time. Mix that with Walnut Defense and a handful of Split Peas, which can do what they do best and take out the Prospectors, this level doesn't look too bad. But then there's all the Gargantuars. Unlike the previous levels, which only put down 1 or 2, this level has a ton of them. And it's very hard to handle them all without at least one of your plants dying. Eventually, with enough practice, and by stalling the last Gargantuar with a minecart, I was able to beat the level. The next interesting level is way later on Day 17, where the flowers mean that you can't really build a Coconut Cannon defense before you lose the level. I ended up using Bonk Choys, which were quick and powerful enough to deal with all the threats in this level. Next up is Day 20, which is one of my personal favorite levels in the challenge. It's also impossible. I should probably explain that part first. On Wave 3, a Buckethead zombie spawns, and I ended up using a potato mine to kill it for 2 reasons. For one, I'm not actually sure the level's possible without doing this, since tanking this and later waves with the walnut would be really difficult, but maybe with good luck it could happen. The thing is, that actually doesn't matter because of the way Not Okay Corral works. See, in these levels you get 1 plant for every wave, and you can't progress the level until you plant that plant. Basically, you're forced to plant a plant every wave, and since there's 10 waves in this level, that means you have to plant 10 plants. The issue is that in this level, the entire lawn is filled with minecarts and rails, making it so that only 9 plants can be on the lawn at a time. Even if I kept all of my plants alive, I wouldn't be able to plant the 10th one without shoveling one of the plants already on screen. This means that one plant has to be sacrificed, and since using a potato mine in Wave 3 makes the level significantly easier or even possible, it has to die here. It's always the potato mines, man. The level isn't over yet though. This level really wants you to use potato mines and chili beans, both of which are completely useless, and there's no plant food in this level. You really have to figure out a good strategy. The strategy I'd recommend using starts with putting a pea shooter in the first column. Pretty obvious, it gives you the most time to kill zombies in the first half of the level. On Wave 2, put a walnut in the third column. There are actually a few places you could put it, but I found that putting it this far back gives you the most time to think in the hardest waves while also giving you space to plant a repeater. Like I said earlier, you use the potato mine on the bucket head on Wave 3, but on Wave 4, things get a little trickier. Since the zombie spawning in this level is always the same, a conehead and a basic will always spawn together in the middle lane, and they chew through walnuts twice as fast. After taking care of the other basic zombies, it's really difficult to keep the walnut alive, and even more difficult to keep it pretty healthy for the later waves in the level. If you're lucky, the basic zombie will outspeed the conehead zombie and you can take it out, making your walnut get eaten a lot less. Otherwise, move the minecart back and forth to make it so your walnut gets eaten as little as possible. If all goes well, you'll make it to Wave 5, which is pretty easily beaten by putting a repeater on the second column. And stop right there. This is the point in the level where you will not always get the same plants. I don't even know what exact plants appear or what the odds of them are because it's not very well documented on the PvZ wiki, and that's where I get most of my information. From what I can tell, it seems to either give you a certain plant depending on what wave you're on, or a repeater, and depending on which one you get, you're gonna have to adapt your strategy. Put the repeaters in the back and the instants in the front, though I recommend keeping the rightmost column open in case you get a walnut to put there. It helps a lot with the chicken wrangler that shows up at the last wave. Wave 6 in particular is very difficult if you don't get a repeater, and it requires almost perfect stalling, but it is possible even with the worst luck. On Wave 8, there's a good chance you get a coconut cannon. Man, I really cannot avoid using this guy, even here. With coconut cannon being as powerful as it is, if you get this guy here, you've basically won the level, and the shame is tripled if you lose now. From that point on, it's just a matter of reacting well and moving the minecarts well, especially in the last wave, where you have to balance killing a ton of zombies, defending your instance, and taking out a chicken wrangler. In the end though, with about an hour's worth of practice, I was able to beat the level. I really like this one because not only is it really skill-based, but even with the worst RNG, it's still possible. It is pretty unfortunate that a potato mine had to die here though. We were on a pretty good deathless streak for a while. After thinking of all those strategies for Wild West Day 20, honestly, the idea of going back to regular levels kinda made me a bit sad. Other than the levels I'm talking about, I've been using the exact same strategy for every level of Wild West, and Coconut Cannon and Spikeweed were starting to get a little boring. I ended up trying some new things for the next few levels, mainly using Bonk Choy, as, I don't know, it's just a fun plant. This paid off once I reached an interesting level, that being Day 24. It's one of the few levels in the world that doesn't let you plant on minecarts, instead putting endangered walnuts on them. I haven't touched on endangered plants yet, and that's because they're really easy. Their whole deal is that you can't let them die, and we can't let any of our plants die. Think of them as pre-planted plants that have no risk of making the challenge impossible. If anything, they tend to help more than they hurt. The issue is that since we don't have minecarts, coconut cannons aren't as good, and when you mix that with the high amount of chicken wranglers in this level, things can get a bit out of hand. My winning attempt used lightning reeds instead. These guys aren't quite as good in this challenge since, like pea shooter, they have to be spammed to be good, but they are really good at crowd control, so they are perfect for this level. Finally, it's the Zomboss battle, which is one of the easiest yet again thanks to the fact that this level has some of the best plants in the entire game. Peapod is back, and by putting it on the minecarts you can do insane damage with or without plant food. Melon Pults do good splash damage as well, but the real killer here is Winter Melon. They slow down the Zombots so that they go so much slower and the battle is significantly easier. These plants can easily skip phase 2, and when you mix that with a great tall nut defense, this level's not too bad. However, there is one hiccup, and that's the Zombot's missile attack, because it targets multiple plants this time. A lot of the time, he'll just shoot at the minecarts, which can easily be dodged without plant food, but otherwise you can't really defend all the plants at once, and 9 times out of 10 you'll have to restart the level. This level is basically a race to beat the Zombot before it can do that, but with some good luck, it can happen. One last thing that relates to all the Zombot battles up to this point. Do not, I repeat, do not plant plants in the place where the Zombot lands at the end of the fight. They will die and they cannot be saved. I had a very embarrassing loss because of this. As long as you don't make any stupid mistakes, the level will be beaten and Wild West is done. It's then on to Frostbite Caves, and after some pretty easy worlds, this one is definitely a difficulty spike. The regular levels are still pretty simple. The chilling ones can be an issue, but by the time Pepperpolt's unlocked, they're pretty easily dealt with. Pepperpolt is great in general for this challenge. It does good damage and is great at dealing with swarms. I love you, Pepperpolt, even if nobody else does. However, Frostbite Caves is notorious for having a ton of conveyor belt levels, especially compared to the last few worlds, and a lot of them require unique strategies. The first half of Frostbite Caves in particular has a lot of these, starting with Day 3. This level focuses on Hurricane, which we can't use. There are plenty of other good plants in this level too, but there are also a ton of zombies, which is just going to get more and more common as we get further through the game. The slider tiles also make the lawnmowers pretty useless except for the top one, but they also give a safe place to put pea shooters and repeaters, while spikeweeds do pretty good crowd control. This one honestly wasn't too bad. I ended up beating it first try, but the next Hurricane focused level, that being Day 8, was a lot tougher. The zombies are just as strong, if not stronger, and the plants you're given, Pepperpolt and Bonk Choy, are rarely enough to deal with all of it. I also don't think they put a cap to how many Hurricanes can be on the conveyor belt, so they will be flooding it by the time the level's over. The slider tiles don't help either, as they focus all the zombies in the middle row, and since there's not much plant food in this level, it's hard to deal with all of it. It took good Pepperpolt and Bonk Choy usage to beat this level, and Walnut First Aid was basically necessary to deal with the final wave. A while after that is Frostbite Caves Day 11, which I usually consider to be one of the biggest difficulty spikes in the entire game, and it's not much different for this challenge. It may just be a regular level, but it's the first 4-flag level in the game, which means the zombie density gets really high by the end. Mix that with the restrictions on plants, the frozen zombies, and the awkward slider tiles, and this one's a huge challenge. I ended up just ignoring the slider tiles entirely and playing it like a normal level. Simplifying things made it a lot easier to deal with the big threats. Simplifying things definitely doesn't work for the next tricky level, that being the Gargantuar battle, because it sends out 3 Gargantuars and only barely gives enough plant food to fend them off. You of course want to save the plant food for the Gargantuars, but by not using it earlier, the strong zombies and really bad winds can get out of hand. The strategy I decided on for this level was to put Pepperpolts in the even-numbered rows and Repeaters in the odd-numbered rows. Pepperpolts are great heating plants and do great splash damage, to the point where they help a ton later on in the fight. The Gargantuars only spawn in the odd-numbered rows, and 2 Repeaters can kill them with only 1 plant food as long as Chard Guard is there to help with the imps. I also put Spikeweeds and Chard Guards in places that synergized well with the slider tiles. Chard Guards in general are amazing here, as they push the zombies back and keep your plants safe, as long as you remember to repair them with Walnut First Aid every so often. Day 16 took a lot of attempts and a lot of strategy to figure out, but it was a very satisfying victory. The second half of the world plays out a little differently, because the conveyor belt levels are actually the easy ones. Instead of showcasing Hurricane, these levels show off Fire Pea Shooter and Rhotabega, and they make the respective levels really easy thanks to their power. Fire Pea Shooter is just a solid gemium, but Rhotabega is amazing at dealing a ton of damage all across the lawn. They are a little worse in this challenge because they have to be spammed to be amazing. But come on, it's Rhotabega! She's such a cool plant, what's not to love? Surprisingly, it's actually a lot of normal levels that cause issues, starting with Day 22, which has a lot of frozen guacodiles at the front of the lawn. Because there are weasel hoarders in this level, there is no way they won't get triggered if they're let loose, so I ended up using snapdragons and spikeweeds to keep them frozen up until the very end of the level. Day 23 is a lot worse though. The endangered Chard Guards aren't an issue, in fact they make the level easier, but the frozen twin sunflowers absolutely are. You basically have to plant ahead to protect them, especially when you look at the slider tiles and especially the snowstorms that have a good chance of killing the twin sunflowers. The worst part are the unique zombies. Weasel hoarders are bad enough, but troglobites can take a lot of damage and can easily crush your plants if you're not careful. To put it bluntly, there is a lot going on in this level, and this time I couldn't really deal with it. I'm just not good enough at this game to micromanage all the weasels and the snowstorms and the ice blocks and everything else. I decided to switch out Coconut Cannon for Repeater. Don't get me wrong, Coconut Cannon's a better plant, but focusing on firing it just made the rest of the level too complicated. Surprisingly, simplifying the level like this almost immediately let me beat it, though the practice from earlier definitely helped. After that come a lot of the easy conveyor belt levels I talked about earlier, but Day 29, the penultimate level of the world, is pretty interesting. Ignoring the pretty useless Stunions, Sunflower Rutabaga and Fire Pea Shooter are all good plants, but they're all only good when spammed, and by putting so many of them on the lawn, they will eventually get crushed by Troglobite Zombie. Instead of spamming mindlessly, I used the frozen sunflowers to afford 3 columns of rutabagas that I protected with a column of walnuts that I made sure to heal every so often. That setup was able to beat the level. I like this one a lot because it showed off the restrictions of this challenge pretty well. Then is the next Zomboss battle, and after 2 pretty easy ones, it was about time we got to one that made me want to rip out my hair. It sucks too, because this one had potential to be an interesting challenge. It's one of my favorite Zomboss battles in the game, but it's unique in that it's the only Zomboss battle that doesn't give you plant food. This Zombot also has its variation of a missile attack, where it throws an ice shard at a plant, killing it unless you defend it with plant food. You see the problem. If Zomboss throws a single ice shard at a plant, it dies and the challenge is failed and we have to restart. This leads to 2 things. 1, this is definitely the hardest level yet, by far. Hardest level I'm going to be covering in the entire video. If your plants get hit, you have to restart. If Zomboss makes ice blocks too early, you have to restart. If too many blockheads come from the ice blocks, you have to restart, and so on and so forth. It made the level a nightmare to beat, but at the same time, it also made it so the level didn't really require any strategy. The one strategy that is important is where you put your plants. You want to put 3-peaters in the middle row, rutabagas in the outer rows except for the corners, and fire plants in between. This is important because it prevents the top and bottom rows from having any zombies, which makes the level a lot easier. You also want to use pepper pults as little as possible, as they tend to hit other ice blocks, and put chard guards in the front, making sure to save at least one on the conveyor belt so you can repair them. That's all decided before the fight though, because once you're actually put into a bad situation, there's almost nothing you can do because of the lack of plant food. There's honestly very little to talk about with this one. You just restart until you get lucky. If save scumming was still a thing, I definitely would do it with this level. I spent half of March and probably over 20 hours total just restarting this level over and over, until finally I got a run where the Zombot mainly just blew cold winds over and over. It's really lucky, but it was bound to happen eventually. Listen, I love doing these challenges, and this one in particular was amazing. There are a ton of unique levels, even ones I didn't cover, and even the basic levels are still a lot of fun. If anyone watching this is interested in doing a fun challenge, I highly recommend doing this one. It's a blast. But this level, just skip it. It's not worth it. Just use like 5 power flames to destroy the Zombot and pretend you beat it the regular way. It's way better than restarting the level over and over and over. It sucks too, because otherwise this was a really interesting world with a ton of levels that require great strategies to pull them off, but because of this level, it kind of just goes out with a whimper instead of a bang. Next up is Lost City, and let me get the big thing out of the way first. Excavator zombies are the most dangerous zombie we've seen yet. Their shovel, blocks, coconut cannons, shots, along with most of the other good plants we've unlocked so far. Their shoveling mechanic means they can't be blocked by defensive plants, and if they get too far into your defense, they'll often shovel your plant into a much more dangerous position. There are a few ways you can deal with Excavator Zombie though. For one, you can try and attack other nearby zombies and use the splash damage to take out the Excavator Zombies. This works a lot better in later parts of the level that are more swarmy. You can also use other plants to take them out. I usually used Kernel Pult, but Pepper Pult and Wintermelon gave me good results too. Finally, you can just use Coconut Cannon's plant food to take them out. I usually went with this route because I had plant food to spare, since these first few basic levels are really easy. The other zombies in this world aren't terrible, and the gold tiles make it a lot easier to afford coconut cannons. That means this is yet another world where the unique levels are the issue, starting with day 3, which has a ton of lava guavas. These guys are pretty much unusable, but you're also given red stingers, which have great DPS when planted in the back and can work as a good defensive plant when put in the front. You're pretty much forced to plant the lava guavas, so you have to put them in a safe place while planting enough red stingers that they're well protected. You also want to use plant food well. Lava guava's plant food is basically a direct upgrade to red stingers, and you want to save plant food for the later waves, though you should have a lot in excess. Seriously, whose idea was this? You may not get enough red stingers to protect your lava guavas, but as long as you get a little lucky, you should be able to beat this level in no time. The next lava guava focused level, day 14, is also pretty interesting, as you're only given sunflower, lava guava, and Aki. Aki works well for most of the level. It has good damage, good crowd control, and is basically just a better Bloomerang. However, it's completely useless against the Parasol zombies. There is one solution though, and that's Lava Guava's plant food. This works pretty well, but there's only barely enough plant food to take out the Parasol zombies, meaning you can't use it for the rest of the fight, and that makes the rest of the level a lot trickier. I found that by using sunflowers, my Akis were too close to the dangerous zombies in the level. I decided to not use sunflowers and instead use the gold tiles to afford an Aki defense. This worked well enough to let me beat the level. Then comes day 16, and let me set the tone for this level. On my first attempt, I was just cruising through. The excavator zombies and parasol zombies are pretty tricky in this one, especially with all the parachute rains, but with good plant food usage and by playing reactively, you can deal with it pretty well. However, that all came crashing down once the final wave arrived. I don't think I need to explain the issue with there being a column of gargantuars here. These are almost impossible to deal with. This one wave redefines the entire fight. The plants you're given aren't very strong, so the only real way you could possibly take out the gargantuars is by spamming Aki's plant food. You also need to have a specific plant setup to deal with the gargantuars, and since you're saving the plant food for them, you can't use it for the rest of the fight, just like in day 14. Just like that, the entire level is made 10 times more difficult, and the first thing to look at is how you're gonna set up your defense. In most of the rows, you can't plant past the third column without the risk of a gargantuar crushing it. The middle row is the exception to this because a third gargantuar spawns there, so it needs more firepower. I found that 3 red stingers and 3 Akis were the only setup that did enough damage to take them out while still being far enough from the front. That sounds simple enough, but what's a lot worse is actually beating the rest of the level with this setup. Since this level doesn't have lawnmowers, you immediately have to plant 2 Akis to stop the first bug zombie, and the only wave you can stall is wave 2. In case you don't know, in each wave there's a certain damage threshold that has to be hit before the wave will progress, otherwise it'll just pass after a certain amount of time. By not hitting this damage threshold, you can stall out levels better. The interesting thing is that from what I found, bits of armor like cones and buckets don't count towards this damage threshold, meaning you can damage them as much as you want without risk of the wave progressing too quickly. You can use a red stinger and an Aki to take out the bucket head as long as you make sure not to damage the basic zombie until you need to. Then comes the rest of the level, and in it your only real plants are Aki and red stinger. Akis do good crowd control but are blocked by parasol zombies, while red stingers do good damage but are blocked by excavator zombies. Excavator zombies in particular are really bad because if they shovel a plant back once, it will get crushed by the gargantuars. You need to prioritize taking them out. 1 Aki can take out an excavator zombie if nothing else interferes, but since a lot of things are interfering, it usually takes 2. At the end of the first flag, excavator zombies will spawn in rows 1, 3, and 5, so you need some Akis in those rows. That's why stalling wave 2 is so important. Mix that with the parasol zombies, and this is a level where you really need to play reactively. Knowing when and where to place each plant is vital for the first 2 flags. For me, by restarting the level over and over, I was able to get the same zombie layout every time until I rebooted the game. This is useful in a ton of levels, but especially here because it helps you practice and find the best layout. The plants introduced later in the level just fill up the conveyor belt. Lava Guava and Cherry Bomb are both useless, and while Endurian seems good with good defense and damage, you can't plant very far ahead, so it's basically useless. Finally are the Lost Pilot zombies. Usually they're not much of a threat because they can't spawn past the 4th column, but if they spawn in the middle row, they'll start eating in a key and you need at least 2 red stingers to take them out in time. It'll take a lot of work and a lot of practice, but eventually you'll reach the Gargantuar wave with this setup. Wait until the Gargantuar in the middle either throws an imp or tries to smash the Aki, and then use its plant food, making sure to grab the floating plant food at the same time. Then just keep using plant food on that same Aki until you run out. Try and time it right so the Aki doesn't get smashed, and you can also take out all the imps that get thrown. The Gargantuars will still have some health left, but if the plants manage to take them out before they smash your plants, congratulations, you have managed to beat the level. This was one of the toughest levels yet. It took a ton of strategy to figure out the perfect layout, and even more to actually get a winning run. In the end though, this was my favorite level yet. It took a ton of skill, almost no RNG, and felt really satisfying to win. If you don't try any other levels with this challenge, I at least recommend trying this one. Day 18 is another noteworthy level, as it starts out with the Stallia in the front and immediately sends a zombie at it. I don't know about you, but I think this looks really familiar. The bug zombie just flies over the red stingers, making it almost impossible to defend the Stallia, though it at least makes the bug zombie fly a bit slower. It takes 3 red stingers to even have a chance of taking out the bug zombie, and that takes a lot of RNG because usually Stallias are going to be overflowing the conveyor belt. However, even with the max amount of red stingers, 2 in the front or 2 in the back, I still couldn't stop the bug zombie. It's just too fast and too tanky. The only option here would be mower launching, but since that's unlocked in far future, we don't have any options and Stallia has to die here. The rest of the level is really easy. It's basically just a toned down day 16, but it sucks to have pre-planted plants die this late into the run. Unfortunately, we're not done yet, because somehow day 22 is even worse. This level focuses on trap tiles, but the issue is that you can't plant on them without your plants dying, and since there's no plant food to protect your plants, they're basically unusable. This level's just such a weird experience without using trap tiles. For one, excavator zombies are basically invincible since your only attackers are red stinger and puff shroom. Without plant food, Stallia, iceberg lettuce, and puff shroom are all basically useless, which means the only real plant is, yet again, red stinger. Then there are the huge swarms of bucketheads that are definitely not supposed to be taken out with red stingers, but we don't really have a choice. There have been some levels with mechanics that made them impossible, but out of every level in the game, this is the one that just does not feel like it was made for this challenge. The big issue with this level is that bug zombies spawn in the top and bottom row, and since the fire trap tiles can't take them out, you have to use a lawnmower to defeat them. This happens twice in this level, and the lawnmowers can only deal with one wave of them. You could take them out with red stingers, but then the excavators and gargantuars that spawn in those rows would step on the fire trap tiles and kill the red stingers. You can't really mix up the zombie layouts either, because almost all zombies have set spawning locations, with the only exceptions being the parachute rains and a few flag zombies. At first, I thought of this as a puzzle. I tried to shuffle the few zombies around that I could to try and figure out how to take out all these zombies that I can't deal with. Thing is, the level's already more than hard enough without this. The buckethead swarms alone basically require a lost pilot zombie to land on the trap tile to take them out for you. There's just so much going against beating this level. I took several hours trying to figure out strategies for it, but nothing seemed to work. There was one idea I had that could hypothetically work. It would require 2 lost pilot zombies to spawn in the middle row, but you could rush the first flag and then kill the second group of bug zombies with one of the trap tiles. After a lot of testing though, I'm pretty sure that since only 4 zombies spawn in the first parachute rain, you can't get more than 1 in any row. Out of all the impossible levels in this video, this is the one that's the most likely to be possible. I might have missed something, and if you figure it out, tell me in the comments. Instead, I had to take out the second wave of bug zombies with red stingers and put a plant on one of the rock trap tiles to take care of the gargantuars. I decided to use an iceberg lettuce, as they have a history of being willing to sacrifice and seem like they're the only ones capable of doing this in my eyes. Any plant works though. It really sucks getting two impossible levels right next to each other in Lost City of all things. This is a really crummy way to end the video, I'm sorry. I'm just glad that the next Trap Tiles level, Day 28, isn't nearly as bad. I beat it first try without even really thinking. After that is Day 29, the hardest normal level so far, and odds are the hardest one in the entire game. There's no gimmicks, no pre-planted plants, no anything really. It's just a ton of difficult zombies, and this level really tests what you've learned so far. To beat this level, you have to know how to stall zombie waves, deal great damage, focus on the entire board, memorize zombie layouts by restarting, and above all else, never give up. I spent a few hours finding different strategies for this level. I tried lightning reeds, wintermelons, and even Ackies, which somehow I hadn't unlocked yet? Even going back to the world map, I had beaten Day 6 but not unlocked Aki, which I just had no idea you could do. I think what it might have been is that I beat the level but then rebooted the game, leading me to progress to the next level but never unlock Aki. No idea why it happened. I had to beat Day 6 again to get Aki, and it didn't even help with Day 29, but it was pretty interesting to see. Anyway, the big thing that helped with this level was seeing that the most dangerous zombies spawn in rows 1, 3, and 5, so putting defenses in those rows first helped a ton. More stalling with the zombies, especially the bug zombies, helped a lot too, but the big thing was just practicing this level over and over. Winning this level just felt amazing. It felt like it had shown how far I'd come and how much I'd learned since I started this challenge. Day 30 is pretty tricky because of the moss, but since you're given so much sun and the level's pretty quick, it's not too bad. I'd also like to point out Day 31. No reason. Just thought I might point it out. Finally is the Lost City Zombot, and if you thought the Frostbite Caves Zombot was bad, this one is better, but that's only because it's like at least 20% less brain dead. The issue here is the same as in Day 22, and that's the Trap Tiles. Specifically, in this fight, the Zombot's lane clearing attack has him activating one of the Fire Trap Tiles. The difference between this and previous lane clearing attacks is that you can't block the attack with plant food, you can only defend a single plant. This means that if, say, he tries to burn 3 plants, you need 3 plant food to keep everyone alive. Once you get later into the level and there's a ton of plants on the field, this is almost impossible to avoid and you're gonna have to rely on RNG. Admittedly, Phase 1 is pretty interesting thanks to the Parasol zombies and Excavator zombies. They make it so you have to think about where you plant all your plants. Knowing where to put the red stingers and Ackies, or when to use the trap tiles and when not to, takes a lot of strategy and luck, and it's pretty fun. It definitely helps to not plant plants if you don't have to, as that gives zombies a lower chance of burning your plants. After Phase 1 though, the fight goes from an interesting zomboss battle to an RNG machine. There aren't necessarily any gargantuars here, but the zombies are still pretty tough, so you're gonna have to plant a lot of plants to defend them, not like you wouldn't be anyways. That means that, like with Frostbite Caves, you basically just have to pray he doesn't destroy your plants, and it's even harder because this level is very difficult to rush. Red Stinger and Aki are solid plants in their own right, but the issue is that their plant foods are meant for crowd control. They don't do much damage to the Zombot itself. Stalia's plant food can slow down the fight, but it's rarely ever worth it, and while Bonk Choi's plant does good damage, it's not as much as you'd think and tends to put Bonk Choi in a lot of danger like in Ancient Egypt Zomboss battle. Usually I ended up using plant food to take out the other zombies anyways, especially the Turquoise Skull zombies in Phase 3, which can be really dangerous if you don't deal with them. That meant that I had to watch the attacking plants take out the Zomboss all on their own, which is very slow and led to a lot of attempts crashing and burning before I could finish the fight. Truth be told, this and the Frostbite Caves Zomboss are both practically impossible. I had to restart over and over for them, and I would have save scummed if it was still a thing, so I didn't have to spend hours or even days beating them. This is another one I'd recommend skipping for anyone wanting to try the challenge, but for me, after a lot of time, I finally beat it. And with that, the video is over. I've been forced to lose a lot of plants already, but honestly, I'm just proud of how well I've done so far. There's been a ton of interesting strategies for this challenge so far, and with Far Future and Beyond having even more difficult levels and zombies, but giving a lot more tools to help with them, the challenge is still gonna look really interesting from here on out. The hardest levels are still yet to come, so stay tuned for that. Until then, I hope you enjoyed the video, because it was a long one. I definitely expected it to be a big video, but not this big. It's probably my highest effort video I've put on either channel. That's a little concerning, considering that this is part 1, and I'll probably have even more to talk about with the later worlds of this game, but I'm just glad I got a video out that was this high quality. For those of you still watching, thanks for sticking around, and if you liked it, make sure to like and subscribe. It helps a ton, and it'll give me a great reason to make videos this good, or even better, in the future. Next, I'll probably be releasing the next part of the PvZ Heroes Nuzlocke. You guys seem to like that, and it'll probably be a bit more high quality than the first part. Stay tuned for that video, along with the next part of this series and any other videos I feel like making. Till then, I'll see you around.